In our last session, I brought up that quote by Stalin, "One death is a tragedy and a million is a statistic." You can reverse that idea and start to look at all those numbers, and that seems so abstract, and it's oftentimes helpful to bring it back and put flesh on the bones. When Libby was talking with us, she gave us insight that perhaps many of us have not heard before in the topic of human trafficking and the sex trade, the age of those kids. The reality of it is just sickening. Total injustice, total tragedy. She gave a sort of skeletal drawing in a sense. Our next speaker is going to put flesh on the bones right here. She's spoken across the country on television, on radio, and in front of very large audiences. I have a boy and 2 girls at home. My daughters, little princesses, little pink girls. They love to play with dolls. They love to play dress up, play with princesses. Like most girls that age, Melissa Woodward loved this too. She had dreams. She had visions. She had aspirations. But her dreams were cut short because she was met at a very young age, sort of like some of those we saw in the video, with being sold into a life of sex slavery. Her words are beyond what can, her life, her story is beyond what words can share. Although I've been in conversation with her for some time now about the symposium event and using her as a speaker to help broadcast the situation across the country, the problem that we're facing. I only learned last week when I was in the UK that Melissa will be speaking and will be bald tonight. And after considering the fact that she's already lived a very heavy life, she's got 3 children of her own, and now she's facing 3rd stage ovarian cancer and is going through chemo. I shaved my head just to show to her of solidarity. She was rather, embarrassed to come and do an event like this. I know, not much sacrifice, my wife tells me, because I only had 2 or 3 strands of hair anyway. But like me, she has 3 kids at home. Unlike me, she has stage 3 ovarian cancer. Many of you have gone through that. Many of you have, probably no one has experienced what she has before this. It's amazing she's agreed to even be with us at this time tonight, and it's our privilege to hear her story in person. Her talk is, "I was once a sex slave, but now I am free." Please welcome with me tonight, Melissa Woodward.
Purdue, and for somebody like a small-town Texas girl, that is awesome. I don't know what it was like when you got your acceptance letter to come to such a prestigious university, but I can tell you, when he sent me the email and asked me to be here, I wanted to do the happy dance. Yeah! The next thought, like any other woman here, was what, girls? What to wear. Did not anticipate it was going to be a hat. I had long blonde locks until just a couple weeks ago. And then I thought about, what am I going to say? It's not easy to get up here and share a story. My daughter was telling me the other day how she was walking through the halls at school, and she could hear, everybody whisper and looking at her. And I said, okay, well, maybe they were looking at you. But every time I get in front of an audience, I promise you, they're looking at me. And I promise you, they're not going to laugh at my jokes. And I promise you, I'm going to be naked, like I feel so bare. Because in this next 30 minutes, hour, you're going to know everything about me. And I won't even know your name. I can tell you that if you're looking for an award-winning speaker, it's not me. I actually, like a lot of college students, I think, and I have a 6th grade education, so I'm not exactly sure what it's like, but I would imagine this. If I had a speech to do, I would be writing it like I did last night and plagiarizing most of it. So this is all my own work. Well, maybe they did bring me here for my sense of humor. Actually, I can't believe I made everybody laugh. But well, my story is why they brought me here. My story began in 1981. I was 4 years old. Do not please do the math. 4 years old, and I was much like most of what you looked like as a child. I had strawberry blonde hair and big blue eyes. I loved playing with my Barbie dolls, loved riding my bicycle, loved going up and stealing other people's french fries because I made no strangers. I loved everybody, still do. But behind closed doors was a much different life. My dad was a Baptist minister, and my mom was a school teacher. And I was being groomed to be sold as a sex slave. Not in some third world country, but in Dallas, Texas. It began being groomed through physical and sexual abuse. And then, as if that was not bad enough, I got subjected to pornography. And the list goes on and on and on. And I was 4. I tried to pretend that everything was fine, and I kept quiet. A predator's best weapon is for us to be silent. But my best weapon, I learned, was to speak. Because while I'm going to tell you my story is not unique. In fact, 300,000 Americans face this thing every single year. I wish I could say that this is just not, out of the ordinary. In the last 5 years, rescuing 208 children here in the United States, I can tell you most of us share the same story. While the verbiage is a little bit different, some of the scenes a little bit different, it's not uncommon. When I was 10 years old, life was pretty normal, again, from what looked like the outside. It's hard to imagine a little child in slavery. It's even harder to imagine that she might be going to the school that you went to. She might be in your Girl Scout troop. She might be in your dance company. She might go to your church every time the doors are open. Because I was not hidden underground at this time. I was right there in front of plain view. Every evening after school, I would come home, and then I would get dolled up. And on Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays, I was taken to the local bars where there was no shortage of predators. Sometimes it was 5 men a night, other times it was 30 men a night. Nibble by nibble by nibble, as if I was just a slab of meat. I had no choice to run. I couldn't say no. I had no rights whatsoever. I was held captive. I was in fear for my life, and I just wanted the nightmare to end. I continued going to school. That was my outlet. I dreamed big dreams. I wanted to go to college, and I wanted to go and be a police officer so I could take bad people off the streets. I wanted to be a mommy, which I was told years later that because of all the damage, that would never happen. But my story, because I do include my Savior, I can tell you I have 3 amazingly healthy children that I don't think it would be possible any other way. So I continued going through life, and at 13, in 6th grade, right around the age of 13, in 6th grade we were shown a video at school, and it talked about the birds and the bees. Do you guys remember that chat? Oh, I hated it. So I was showing everything, and then it talks about, all of a sudden, it talks about abuse, and abuse is wrong. And if you're being abused, then you should go tell somebody. So being the compliant little girl who never wanted to get in trouble, I went straight to my counselor at the same school where my mother taught. So instead of being rescued, instead of somebody saying, let me get you out, let me help you, that was the last day of any sense of normalcy I would ever have. So instead of going to school, instead of getting to go to college, and have the dreams that I always dreamed of, I was instead sent to an underground warehouse where 16 hours a day I would remain literally handcuffed to a twin-size bed. I was not the only girl there. There was 14 of us. Sometimes I would look over and wonder what happened to the girl beside me. I never knew until years later. They didn't survive. 1% of the children sold ever escape, while 1 out of every 100,000 traffickers are ever convicted, and this must change. So at 13, being handcuffed, every night, same thing, over and over and over again, waiting, hoping that somehow this might end. And then finally, one day it did. A gentleman walked in, and after his deed was done, he pulled a small flask of lighter fluid from his coat pocket. Almost all of my customers were CEOs, doctors, attorneys, men that could not afford to get caught, and men that could afford to buy children. They were not young men. These men were the ages of my grandfather and my father. They didn't have tattoos and piercings and what you look at as the bad boy. No, they were disguised in suits, and they were monsters. And he looked at me and he said, I've always wanted to see a child burned to death, and I am picking you. And I froze. And then I thought for just 1 minute, thank God I can die. And from my waist down, he ignited me on fire. And if that wasn't bad enough, I was left in a garbage can to die. This was my childhood. A childhood which should have been a fantasy was worse than most people's nightmares. When I woke up, I was laying in a hospital room, and I had already started going through multiple surgeries to repair the seared flesh, started getting recuperation going on, and I told the doctors, you can't send me back. Please don't send me back. Send me anywhere, but just don't send me home. But what's going to believe that a drug addict now to help fog over the memory? And here's 2 pillars of a community, a pastor and a teacher. And they're going to believe a 14-year-old when they've never even heard of human trafficking in their life. So instead, I thought, you know what? I've got a chance. I'm going to escape. But how does a 14-year-old make it on the streets with no family, no financial support, no job skills, no life skills, and a drug addiction? The same way I'd been surviving all along. So I got caught up into gangs. I got caught up into doing things that I'm not proud to admit. And I went through this until at 17, my trafficker, AKA boyfriend, because all of these girls will call them daddy or boyfriends. It's very hard to understand how one moment they're beating the snot out of you, and the next minute they're taking you to Disneyland. But that is exactly what we've seen time and time and time again. It's the same thing as domestic violence in many, many ways. And so I said, well, okay, I'm going to, make it. And he got locked up on other charges. And now I'm 17, still no job skills, no family support, no education, no anything. So I made my living the same way that I'd continued to make it since I was the age of 4. I went into adult entertainment. I went through all of that, continued using drugs, went in and out of jail, in and out of bad marriages, had 3 children who, while I loved them, they were not as important as my addictions, and continued trying to find my way in this life. And every time I would try, the door would slam and slam and slam. I would try to get a normal job, even if it was just a job at McDonald's. But what are you going to put on a resume? I've been a stripper. I've been this. Oh, and by the way, I've got a rap sheet a mile long. Hardly. So by that time, once I lost my children at the final blow, I decided, you know what? I've had enough of this life. And while I always believed in heaven or hell being raised in church, I thought hell would be so much better than the hell here on earth. And so I took off on a suicide mission, and I tried to commit suicide. And thank God I didn't succeed at that one. And then I heard a little bitty voice, what if everything could be different? And I thought, I've tried everything, in and out of rehabs, trying to get help, doing everything that I know how to possibly do, and nothing is working. And the only thing that I can tell you, I know that speaking about Jesus is probably not, the popular thing to do, But they asked me to come share my story. And there's no way I could tell you my story, as horrific as it was, and leave the most important part out of it. Because I'm telling you, it was only by the grace and the love of Jesus Christ in my life that I was forever changed. You see, when I heard that little voice, I thought, okay, I'm going to try to do something. And I did. I went back into rehab. And I would like to say I came out and that I never stuck another needle in my arm, but that would be a lie. And so I was right at the point where I could see my children again. And my little girl comes to me. And she's 5, my oldest one. She's now 14 and in college. Thank you. Yeah, she was smart. See what I could have been? So she's 5 years old, and she comes to me. She's like, Mommy, we got to talk. And we're big girl talk. And I'm like, I don't really want to talk. Because I knew what a failure I had been. And I had just seen her, and I really didn't want to hear this whole, oh, Mom, you've been so bad, and look what you've done to me, and blah, blah. I did not want to hear it. And she kept persisting. Like mother, like daughter, she is so persistent. And I thought, well, okay, what is it you want to talk about? She goes, my big Jesus. And I go, honey, he's the one who's caused all of this. Are you stinking kidding me? I am never going to listen to that. She kept persisting and persisting and persisting. And I finally said, all right. Why do you want to tell me about this big Jesus? And she goes, because while you haven't been there, he has. And I froze. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And so I just thought, well, I'll amuse her. I'll sit down on the bed and I'll listen. And I did. And out of the mouth of my baby girl came a message of love, hope, and grace. Somebody that would forgive everything that I had done, because I had been wild. Somebody who would wipe the slate clean and give me another chance. And somebody who loved me because I knew I didn't love myself. And very few people ever had. And so I thought, okay. And I listened. And I put her in bed, and she's like, Mom, can we go to church in the morning? And I had the perfect excuse. I had nothing but hooker clothes hanging in my closet. Can you imagine going? Saturday night special. I actually did go the next morning, by the way, in my hooker clothes. And, yeah, that was a sight to see. So I sat outside, and I'm sitting there, and I'm drinking my tequila, and I'm like, head's going all wild, and I continue to hear the story, and I'm thinking, whoa, okay. And so I finally asked him, I'm like, God, you know what? Let's talk, person to person, me and you. Where you been? Where have you been? When I was crying all those tears, when I was locked up, when I was being burned, when I was being abused, when it was all my parents' fault, where were you? And then he said, Melissa, you are my daughter. You're my little girl. And I've been carrying you the whole time. And I said, really? And that sounds all nice and good, but where were you? And then all of a sudden, instead of having flashbacks that went through my mind all the time, was now having flashbacks of my father and his handprints on me, who never for one split second left me alone. And he was there, right there, and I'd never seen him, but I knew it. How can you survive everything that I'd been through if it wasn't something? And so I said, all right, I'll make you a deal. Are you a dealing God? Because I'm a gambling girl. If you will take all these drugs, since I was 5 years old, had been shooting up on heroin. I'm 27 at this time. 22 years and 10 rehabs. And ain't nothing cured this girl. So if you can do it, I'll tell you what, I'll give you my life. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And the next morning when I woke up and I reached for that heroin, I didn't need it. It was gone, just like that. And I thought, all right, I guess you won the bet. And so I put my hooker clothes on and I went to church. And I've been going to church ever since. And I can tell you, I didn't want to go back and rescue kids. I didn't want to stand up here in front of y'all. I happen to like wearing clothes these days and not telling my secrets. But I can tell you, if it can save one child's life, just one little girl doesn't have to go through the nightmare that I went through. How can I not share my story? How can I not tell you that each and every one of you have an opportunity tonight when you walk out of here? You see, you can turn a blind eye and you can pretend that you didn't know, but now you do. And now each and every one of you are responsible to do something. How many of you have Facebook and Twitter? All you've got to do is go and stick something on your Facebook wall and blow it up. Because let me tell you, if you do Twitter and Facebook, it eventually crosses on and everybody finds out. Call your friends and be like, hey, I heard this wacko girl, and let me tell you her story, but you know what? This is happening like in our campus, in our neighborhoods, and what are we going to do about it? You can do something. And so I ask you to please do something for somebody outside of yourself. Do something for a little girl or a little boy who's going through this now. Thank you for letting me share my story, and thank you for having this event.